So guys, just by way of sort of introduction and housekeeping, I wanted to let you know that we've got about 30 minutes for this talk. We're going to have a panel discussion for the first 15 or 20, and then there'll be a chance for questions at the end if Caroline and Emmy want to ask some questions. And then if you're not speaking, go ahead and mute your mic, but then as soon as you want to chime in, feel free to just unmute yourself and jump in, that's fine. Today, let me sort of introduce the subject. We are having a panel discussion on new ways to get fresh produce to urban consumers. So because access to fresh fruits and vegetables can be a challenge for urban consumers, even in the best of times, limited to maybe just going to the corner and buying a few tomatoes and greens and bananas, or an expensive supermarket or a trip to Mbare. Those are kind of the options when you're in Harare. And then lockdowns from COVID kind of really exacerbated those challenges and made them more evident as farmers suddenly couldn't transport their produce to town. Wholesale markets were closed. A lot of the restaurants and supermarkets were closed or limited in their sales. And so that just kind of brought it all to the more acute fore. And yet in the past years, consumers have seen the market respond to the situation even before COVID with food box subscriptions, deliveries, and farmers markets springing up around Harare. So today we're going to hear from a few of the voices in the urban food system space about what they're doing to bring healthy, fresh food to consumers. So today we've got Mike Davies from the Pomona Community Farm. We've got Adam Howson from Go-Veggies, and we've got Percy Toriro, who's an urban environmental planner. Welcome all of you guys, all three of you, and we are going to get started with our questions. Okay, great. So the Pomona Community Farm, with its farmers market that it supplies to, and Go-Veggies, which is a subscription service, each come at this kind of supply chain issue slightly differently. I wanted to ask both Adam and Mike what kind of motivates your business models. Where did it start from? Where did these ideas start from? And why do you feel your approach is important? Maybe Mike, we can start with you.
Oh, thanks, Jen. We started a trust called the Urban Farming Association of Zimbabwe. It was registered 2 years ago. It grew out of our interest in urban agriculture. I've been involved in urban agriculture for 25 years in Harare, trying to get it established as an acceptable and sustainable practice in the urban areas. There is an estimate that 17,000 hectares is under cultivation in the city. So it's a huge area. We initially started wanting to do a TV series on urban agriculture, but we only produced a pilot for that. We didn't raise funding to do a full series. So in late 2018, we obtained a 10-year lease on 5 hectares of land in Harare, where we're setting up the Pomona Community Farm. This is an umbrella for many different projects. So the idea is not that we are farming the land ourselves, although I'm involved in farming, but to provide space for different urban agricultural enterprises. So for instance, we've got mushroom growers, greenhouse growers, permaculture people, animal people, all setting up small projects on the land. The primary partner is, of course, the Pomona Farmers Market. Now, we set this up in July last year to provide an outlet for urban growers. These are primarily small background, small-scale commercial operations that have problems supplying the chains with produce because they cannot meet the quantities required by the big supermarkets. So we provide a space in which Mrs. Ndlovu, for instance, can come with a basket of tomatoes and sell them. We will deal with very small-scale producers and provide an outlet to them. So at the moment, 70% of our suppliers are small-scale backyard producers. And there's never really been a market for these people before. As you said, the options are the vendor on the corner or the supermarkets or in Bari, none of which are particularly appealing for various reasons. So we're intermediate somewhere between the corner vendor and Mbari market. We are also able to provide a wide range of foodstuffs. So we're introducing new crops to both the growers and the consumers. Different types of kale, for instance. So there's a wide range of produce that people get. We're also providing an outlet for producers who've never sold their produce commercially. We found a householder with jackfruit in Chisipiti, and so now we sell jackfruit when it's in season. So our vision is providing the sales outlet for small-scale domestic producers.
That's amazing. What about, let's hear from Adam as well. It's yours is a slightly different model, but yeah, let's hear from you as well, Adam.
Okay, thank you. Yes, our model is quite different, a little bit different in that we do have a home farm that supplies us a lot of product. It's a commercial farm. We've also got suppliers of fruit and veg from other commercial farms, but where we come in with small scale is we also have a lot of small scale growers who have a similar problem as to what Mike was saying, where they produce small quantities of high value products. And so we do buy quite a lot of product from small scale growers. What we tend to do also is add value. So we have a product range where there's a lot of, when I say small scale, it's people producing homemade products like, for example, mayonnaise or ketchup or roasted peanuts. You know, we buy sometimes from vendors who bring in nice produce from Chimani Mani. We get pecan nuts. So we get what we sort of, our model was more arrived from getting produce from the farm to the person's front door, and you know, and maybe paying the farmer more and cutting out a few steps in the value chain, and adding value to bespoke products. And so we've tended to have a market which is more a niche market around Harare, but it is, we do sell a lot of home industry, high-end products, not just the fruit and veg. So we've diversified a lot, but still the range of products we all try to sell is as plastic free as possible. You know, we recycle a lot of our glass packaging and our boxes. We use very little plastic, if at all. And we tend to have a zero spray organic garden on the farm. And so we have additive free lines, preservative free lines. So that's kind of where we're trying to promote home produce, not only fruit and veg, but actual finished products. And it's still in a startup stage where we're a niche market, you know, and products are quite high value in general. So it is it's a model that maybe if we could expand the productions of these lines that we currently have, yes, we could become more mainstream. But it's a service-orientated business where, yeah, we do just-in-time trading as such of small growers' produce in not huge quantities, but we're trying to build that up.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
that's sort of some
Yeah, no,
farm
definitely.
to front door. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And it makes me think about also how both you and Mike feel that your businesses are now evolving. Just one example, obviously, you know, of who your suppliers and customers are and how you've seen that change, maybe with the way the pandemic's changed people's lives, but also I think the deeper issue that you just sort of touched on, Adam, is you made a great comment in past conversations about how there are only maybe 20% of people in Harare who have the ability to choose what they eat, and maybe even fewer of those can afford to choose to eat organic or plastic free and make those other kinds of choices. How do you each see that in terms of how your business models are evolving or growing, and how your suppliers and customers may be changing with the various you know, dynamics that are happening in the market? Maybe let's start with you, Mike.
Well, as an essential service, we were not particularly affected by the lockdown beyond the normal preventative disinfections and such. We were never closed during the lockdown period. Our market is quite broad because we are between the wealthier suburbs of northern Harare, Mount Pleasant, Northwood, those sort of areas, as well as Hatcliffe, which is a sprawling settlement of a couple of 100,000 people. So our customers range from the elite and the mercs and whatnot to people on foot coming and buying a bunch of rape. It's our aim not to become exclusive. We do sell processed products. We have a fabulous group called Kunzwana Women's Group who process do soya flour and peanut butter and many other products that we are marketing. So we're open to value-added marketing. As far as the organic side is concerned, the farm itself is completely and fanatically organic. We are looking at a self-certification process for our growers to see what chemicals they're using. But we don't have the resources to set up a proper certification scheme like the Soil Association in Britain. It's too costly. The time is not right for that. So we'll set up a self-certification scheme which will identify products as organic. One of the big pluses of the economic and political crisis in Zimbabwe is that people can't afford fertilizer and pesticides. So they're naturally inclined towards organic techniques because the inputs are much lower. So we find in many of our suppliers are in fact organic.
Okay, great. Adam, same question, how do you feel your business is evolving, or is it evolving, or has it been affected as things are changing in the market? Adam? Oh, you're muted. Adam, you're muted. Can you, there you go.
Sorry. Yes, COVID made a huge difference to our following. So initial and lockdown, severe lockdown circumstances, people to shop through delivery service rather than
so unfortunately, your connection
going
seems
to the
be...
stores. A lot they were Harare.
Okay. So sorry. I think I'm struggling to hear Adam. I don't know if others are also struggling.
How's that?
Yeah, try again, maybe.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a bit better, maybe. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, start again.
Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, COVID catapulted us significantly, where we were a very small startup business doing an essential service, which was just home deliveries. But because of the panic and the panic buying and the shops with horrendous queues, and it drove people to get home deliveries. And, you know, through word of mouth, and we had a previous history, people, you know, a lot more people used us than before. And so it's made a huge difference in our reach, our market reach. We were very small. We're still small, but COVID has made a big difference. You know, this behavior pattern of consumers here, you know, people are quite enjoying getting home deliveries and they want a range of, you know, Zimbabwe's starting to get into it a bit. We're not quite, you have an app where you can order on the app. We're a person-to-person ordering service. So, so COVID has been very helpful in terms of getting us exposed because of the demand for home deliveries, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that actually leads me to our next sort of question, which is, and maybe something where our colleague Percy can join in. As we're seeing these trends in the market start to shape the way food is being delivered or offered or accessed by consumers, what do you see, all of you, but especially I'd like to hear from Percy, what do you see are the options for opening up access for all consumers when it comes to fresh food? Like right now, it's the people who can kind of afford to, but even just the availability of farmers markets and delivery services is in itself opening up access. But Percy, maybe let's start with you to just hear some of your thoughts about how cities and municipalities and communities can kind of help promote or encourage these onward trends that we're hearing about from Mike and Adam. Percy?
Do you want me to?
You can. I'm not sure Percy can hear us. Percy? Oh. Percy, can you hear us? You have to unmute.
Yes, I can.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So maybe come in.
It took a while for me to join, so yeah. But I think the problem with the food system in many parts of our region is that it has not been planned for. Whatever efforts are there are individual efforts, but they are not being led by city leaders, that is municipalities or city officials. In this country, for example, in our cities here in Harare, urban food production is one of the aspects of the food systems that I can maybe talk briefly about, is that there's been phenomenal growth in the production of food in the city, but not in a manner that is positive. There's been a lot of pollution of water sources by the use of fertilizers, yet there is also a lot of organic waste that is not being collected with a very poor refuse collection system, which could benefit from separation of waste and fertilization of crops using organic waste. So because we are not planning for it, we have a lot of problems. Same applies in land use. You find previously there was a bit of effort in creating garden allotments, properly created by the municipality and allocated to different stakeholder groups to grow crops on. But nowadays, or for the past 20 years, that has not been happening. As a result of that, all the cultivation or most of the cultivation happening outside of individual plots has been very negative, very polluting, leading to a lot of land degradation, so it hasn't helped. Meanwhile, the trends globally are that because of rapid urbanization, particularly in our region, in Africa, because although we are the least urbanized, we are currently the fastest urbanizing region. And therefore, the challenge of feeding cities is growing. So we really need to be a lot more proactive in saying, how do people access food and what type of food do we grow it? Do we bring it from the city region, as in outside of the city? How do we mix it? Currently, cities globally produce about 30% at most of their food needs. So we really cannot produce a lot more than 30% because of the nature of cities. They are already very densely populated environments. So there is little that we can do, but that little that we should be doing in our country is not being properly coordinated. So we are not achieving much out of it. Whatever efforts are there could benefit from a better planning, better coordination. So maybe I can say that for now and wait to hear others.
No, that's really important. Those are really important points. So maybe let me just open it up. We do want to save a little time for some questions, but maybe let me just open it up to the rest of the panel for your quick thoughts or input or insight on what you think, therefore, the future of fresh food systems in urban settings, in particular in Zimbabwe's urban settings, might be. What do you think what might be the catalyst for change or evolution of those systems, and what would that system even look like? Any of those just sort of thoughts around that from Mike, Adam, or Percy?
Okay, I can come in. One of the challenges that faces urban growers is the lack of security of tenure on their areas. Many growers are using marginal lands that should not be used for agriculture because they're too close to stream banks or they're contaminated by industrial wastes. So it's really critical that we get a decent policy from the city of Harare that recognizes urban agriculture is here to stay. There's no point opposing it. People have a right to grow food. They have a right to food. So it's much better to work with growers. Our idea is to create allotments, like Percy says, that are serviced allotments. So we get away from the seasonal production that people only grow sweet potatoes, maize, pumpkins and stuff during the rainy season. We believe by setting up properly managed allotments that people can grow all year round, have access to extension services so that they're growing properly, and that the negative effects such as erosion and contamination are minimized. Again, I would say there's not much contamination in rivers because people can't afford fertilizer. The waste problem in Harare is mainly from sewage that is not processed properly, and this has led to contamination of Lake Chivero rather than fertilizer runoff. People are very careful about applying small amounts of fertilizer when they use it. I think also one of the biggest threats is development, both housing development on wetlands, which should be used for the benefit of the general public, not for the profit of a few developers. But City of Harare is in such a mess at the moment that I'm not optimistic to get a decent policy worked out.
I hear you. Adam, Percy, any quick insights before we open it up to questions from the group?
I'd like to come in just quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Though it's more of a dream, the idea that we've considered is you have an urban small-scale growers program. So like we've got the tobacco small-scale growing program where the rural areas, on small areas, we're talking 100 square meters or 50 square meters, people will grow small areas. And if that became an organized and coordinated cooperative within an urban area, because the plots in Harare are big. A lot of the urban, the housing in the middle income and up is over 1 acre per property, which means there's quite a lot of land for cropping. And perhaps if that was coordinated in an organized fashion like the tobacco industry has done on a small scale very successfully with small-scale growers, but maybe it's an urban small-scale growing program, and it would need funding, and you know, it's a bit of a dream. Yeah, but there's a lot of people who are so keen on growing a small scale in their little plots at every house that they live. Yeah, very keen growers. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's, even if it seems like a pipe dream, I really appreciate, and one thing Percy said was, you know, a lot of the reaction from the municipality has been sort of on the negative side, like shutting things down. So it is, I think, important to talk about options in a more positive way. You start with one idea, right? Let me just open it up quickly, unless Percy has something quick to add. But I'd love to hear from our participants. Any questions that you may have. Feel free to either use the chat panel or just unmute your mic and jump in. Any questions from the group?
Yes, can I come in?
Please, I mean, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thank you so much, especially to Mike from Pomona, because us as Kunzwana, we are really enjoying working with the Pomona Farm Fresh produce, you know, and we've become part of the family who supply the market, and we are really enjoying it. But I think that now we need to diversify even further, because we still have a lot of fresh vegetables that we cannot get, you know, in and around Harare. My husband likes Brussels sprouts, and I know there is season for them, but that's something that, you know, you don't get easily, you know, or some specialized berries for, you know, to make jam. Adam was saying they do a lot of value addition. But there's some, we could get some guidance actually from you, from Mike, from Adam, as to what crops now can we grow, those of us who are fortunate to have this land to be able to grow vegetables. So that's my first point. My second point is that we brought in, of course, sweet potato flour and cassava flour to Pomona. Primarily because myself, I am gluten tolerant, and I was tired of buying gluten-free flour for bread and things. But then when I tried to make cakes and muffins and biscuits using sweet potato flour, and I actually started just doing it for myself. Then now, you know, through, of course, Pomona, we're growing a market, you know, and one of the things that I think we would need now is to kind of properly manage its marketing, so that a lot more people know about it. A lot of people don't know that they can actually make even bread from sweet potato flour. And in Zimbabwe, in and around Harare, there is a lot of sweet potatoes. We actually even have a very high percentage of post-harvest loss, because there is no value addition to sweet potatoes, and yet, you know, some of us, that's actually the only time we eat bread, you know. So I just wanted to come in and throw in that comment. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Emmy.
I also just wanted to say something.
Yes, please.
So I wanted to say there is a lot of potential in Harare, which potential, as I have indicated, is not utilized. And to highlight this, Harare is a sprawling city. It's not a very good thing, but we are a sprawling city, so there's a lot of space. What does this translate to? Harare's population density is approximately 30 people per hectare. Our city, compare it with Cairo and New York at about 1,000 people per hectare. So we still have a lot of space. We can do so much more. So what is the missing link? Our policy. We don't have relevant policies. If you go to any progressive city, Cape Town, for example, I've lived there for quite a while, there is a policy to manage food systems, even urban agriculture, as an aspect of the urban food system. We don't have anything in Harare. There is a vacuum. People do things as and when they wish, and the city, it's always a knee-jerk reaction. So we have problems. we need to ramp up production in our city. I learned this working in Kenya, in Nairobi, in 2008 when they had their contested election, and then the city, there was violence, there were blockades. There couldn't be food coming into the city for weeks on end. And the people that were producing in the city came to the rescue of so many others. You know, this is the situation as a result of the COVID-19 related restrictions. We've learned that times can come when you really cannot get whatever you want from wherever you want. So we need to ramp up production, but in order to do that, let's address the policy issues and address the planning issues so that, you know, people can grow and we can also produce a lot more and realize the potential that I've indicated already lies in our situation. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Percy. We are winding down on our available time, but we still have a few more minutes. So I wanted to see if others had some questions, comments, input on what we've heard this morning, this afternoon.
Okay, if no one's coming in, please.
Okay, my name is Susan Marongere. I was wondering whether, you know, some of the vendors are screened, or is it possible to screen them? Because we have had experiences where vegetables and sugarcane has come from, you know, contaminated lots, especially around the banks of Mkwizi. And I recall in Marondera, there was such a case where the vegetables then will be contaminated with E. coli. Obviously, when you receive them, you may not be able to, you know, identify. But as a way of protecting the consumer, I would have thought maybe, just maybe, screening the vendors as to where are you coming with your produce, etc., would help this, you know, not so ideal situation.
Maybe that's a question for Mike or Adam. I think more Mike, perhaps.
Yeah, there are a huge number of challenges with the food system, particularly in the informal sector. But remember, most of the vendors buy at Imbari and then sell in the suburbs. So I think it's going back to the policy approach that Percy raised, that we need the city of Harare to embrace urban agriculture. We should have extension officers working for the city agricultural department who are going out and inspecting crops, looking for public health issues, looking for environmental issues, and not closing down operations, but educating people and facilitating them to produce healthy organic crops. It goes back to the security of tenure. If you have a patch of land that's available for maybe 6 months, maybe a year, there's no inclination to engage in sustainable organic practices. Budsor the land, throw in some fertilizer, put in some maize and get a few bags of maize is the right approach under those circumstances. You cannot expect people to invest in long-term sustainable practices if they don't have the security of tenure. So I would emphasize Percy's point. We need a coherent policy with the city of Harare that goes beyond the Inyanga Declaration of 2003, which was just paid lip service to urban agriculture, but actually sets up a department of urban agriculture within the city that can address these problems.
I think that's coming through very strongly, that for lots of reasons, including food safety and organization of land use and just access for producers and for consumers, that level of sort of organization is required and should be taken up at more the municipal kind of level. We're running short on time. We want to wrap this up, but I would say that if there are things, maybe just quickly, that our panel can think of where communities can actively encourage that to take place, that these are the kinds of things that we can kind of rally around. Any quick thoughts, maybe Percy, advice to our listeners to see what can we do as communities?
Well, I think for a start, we need to come together. This requires a multi-order approach. It's multidisciplinary in nature. It's not a single disciplinary thing. It's not just about agriculture. It's not just about land use. It's not just about environment. It's about all of these things together. So we are going to resolve it in a sustainable manner. We need a multi-stakeholder approach to it. And so the starting point is, let's get together as different professionals, different interest groups, all interested in food, because all of us need a meal to survive every day. So if we come together, that's the starting point. Then we begin to engage each other and say, what form does it take? What are the building blocks to achieving what we want? I think that's how that's what I would say for now. Okay,
perfect. And I see a raised hand from Jenny. Sorry, Jenny, I hadn't seen that before. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, thanks for that. It's Yanni. And thank you to all of our speakers. This has been very interesting. I had a question regarding which I don't actually expect any of you to know the answer to, but I was wondering what the economies of scale of being an urban farmer in Harare were. In other words, for people who are selling at Pomona or through the various other channels we've heard about today, how much do you need to be producing per month in order to make a viable living? I was interested also in, are there urban farmers for whom urban farming is one of a number of different livelihoods that they're participating in order to make ends meet? And I realize this is a fraught question. It goes to tenure that Mike was talking about. It goes also to what you're producing, what the market price is, what other costs you have in terms of rent, in terms of water, on top of your family living. But in order for urban agriculture to be viable, there does have to be some sense of what the return is for the smallholder in order to make it viable, not only for the consumer, but for the producer. And I wondered if perhaps Mike, with the various vendors that you work with at the market, or Adam to that extent too, if there was some sense of what the break point is in terms of the cost of living for an urban Harare resident, and what you can actually viably and consistently rely upon as income from urban farming. If you can't make enough money to do it, then you're going to have to do something else in order to make ends meet, and that's fine. But that again, I think, Percy, there's a policy element there too, for sure, in that if this is more viable, then you can create a policy framework to support that. But just my reflection, if anyone has thoughts on that, I'd be glad to hear, but I realize it's kind of a big one. Thank you.
Hi, Yanni.
I can.
Hi, Yanni, could I come in on that? So,
sure, let's hear from Adam first.
In a short sentence, a vendor, he's going to need to trade about $120 worth of stuff a month to pay his rent, buy enough food to eat per day, and that's only going to give him a budget of about $2 a day on food, okay? And then that's $120. So my pecan nut vendor, he's got to sell me enough kgs of pecan nuts, so he needs to sell me about 12 kgs of peanuts to make his of pecan nuts. He's an example, but that's the starting point. What a lot of people do is they'll multi-trade. So they'll have jobs, they'll have 10 chickens, they'll have a bed of rape, they'll have a couple of goats, they'll have 2 jobs. Their kids will work in the garden at the home. They'll trade a chicken for potatoes from the guy next door who's growing potatoes, and they gain opportunity costs from their small scale production. And a lot of it is barter trading. I've got this, well, I'll trade it for that, or my chicken's worth this, I kill it and sell it. It saves me buying a chicken that night for the meal. And, you know, realistically, the people are surviving on about $1 a day, but a vendor needs, a normal person on the beginning opening bid is at least $120 a month of margin on his trades. And so it's
Percy,
people
did you have-
trade, maybe.
Oh, sorry.
Mm.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Adam.
no, that's what I wanted
Percy,
to.
did you have something?
My quick response is based on my experience working with a group called Abalimi Bezekaya in Cape Town, which actually does a box scheme, and they deliver to different clients on a weekly basis every Tuesday, to be specific. What they do is it takes a lot of coordination, a lot of training. The producers have to be taught skills such as seasonal calendars, where they actually is a plan to say at this time of the year, if you are producing one bed rep, so and so is also producing it, so and so is also producing so many carrots, so many tomatoes. This organization then coordinates everyone, because because of the size of their plots, cannot meaningfully supply a supermarket or a market. So they end up coordinating. It's a very well coordinated process, very laborious. It takes a lot of effort, but once you now have on your books, the people are producing in the month of April, so many vegetables of what type, you then use that to plan, and then this group at a central place coordinates all the produce and distributes it. This is how the small scale micro producers are being assisted to become part of a bigger market.
Great, thank you so much, Percy. Guys, I hate to do this because this conversation is so interesting and it's really led us in really interesting directions, but we have run out of time for our segment today. And I think what's left is just to thank our panel. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Percy, for all your great information and sharing. Thanks to all the participants for your really insightful questions. And we appreciate you coming through. We've recorded this and we'll be streaming it during the festival. And just thanks again. See you on future talks and see you guys soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great, thanks, Jen.
Cheers. Bye, guys.
Appreciate it.
Yep.